When the fog is creeping, and the moon is low, when the town is sleeping, Gauntlight starts to glow. That's when she arises for her midnight lunch. Naughty kids are prizes for her teeth to crunch. But if you obey me, and obey the rules, you're safe from Belcora. She just eats the fools. Greetings, stranger, and welcome to the Rowdy Rockfish's impromptu slam poetry night here in Otari. I jest, of course, firstly because we are rather telling spooky tales tonight, and secondly because my poems would never stoop so low as to utilize such a haphazard trochaic trimeter that demonstrates an over-reliance on catalexis. But forgive the poetry lover in me. He sometimes yearns to break free. What I just recited was a nursery rhyme taught to all children who grow up in Otari. It refers to the sorcerer Belcora, who was the villain slain by the 4 Roseguard hunters 500 years ago. Their battle was long and bloody, and it claimed the lives of both Otari Ilvashti and Belcora herself. Her connection to Gauntlight Keep deep in the Fogfen was long unclear, and as the poem is chiefly designed to stop children from wandering into that hellish bog, many folk believed that any links were just drawing from artistic license. Until 2 years ago, when the Gauntlight suddenly became a bastion of activity once more, and a group of adventurers raised all kinds of hallowed hell there to deal with the threat. They would claim afterwards that it had something to do with the sorcerer, but the exact details should be saved for another time, I think. Instead, using our local nursery rhyme as inspiration, I would like to tell you about ghosts, as they appear to us here in the material plane. The Encyclopaedia Golarianensis stresses that the term often refers to a single creature, but there is as much variety in their kind as there is in any humanoid ancestry. A single ghost may belong to any disposition, creed, or culture. They may wield magic, they may be able to manifest themselves corporeally, they may haunt a location, or a person, or neither. They may be almost anything, and almost nothing. So how do we begin to discuss these undead spirits? Well, despite their variance, scholars of ghost lore have observed a handful of common traits between specimens, and therefore we will begin with a discussion of those, but just remember that nothing is sacred when it comes to ghosts. The supernatural creatures of this world have a habit of defying our expectations. When everything else is stripped away, a ghost is simply the manifestation of a soul that feels it was done great injustice in life and returned from the river of souls to correct it. The first thing to note, therefore, is that a ghost is always an undead, incorporeal spirit. It is a returned soul without a body. That is not to say that ghosts are unable to pilot bodies. Some seek their own, or failing that, can even fleetingly manifest themselves physically. Rather, that their nature begins and ends with their own essence. Forgive me for sounding esoteric, but it is important to understand the difference between these terms. Something is incorporeal if it does not have a physical presence in the world, whereas something is a spirit if it is ephemeral and defined primarily by the existence of its soul above everything else. Finally, something is undead if its existence drew from the river of souls in some way. These terms are all independent of each other, though they are often linked for specific creatures. For example, the enigmatic shadows that dwell in dark places are counted amongst the incorporeal undead, but they are not spirits, because they are not tied to a specific, formally living person per se. A ghost, technically, is an incorporeal spirit that has been denied rest on account of its perceived injustice or failure. Ghost's existence is what I would call subconsciously voluntary, in that their souls chose to reject the usual journey to the boneyard, even if the subsequently manifested ghost wishes to be released from their torment. In contrast, a spirit like a banshee is all but guaranteed to arise if its elven soul's final living moments were defined by hideous betrayal in some way. To especially nefarious mages, therefore, ghosts are actually some of the most difficult beings to create, because no one, not even the soul itself, can predict whether it will reject Pharasma's call. If tonight's carousing hasn't dulled your faculties too harshly, and you are trained in the lore of the other planes, then you may be able to deduce that only beings of the material plane and its siblings can become ghosts, or indeed become undead at all. Outsiders from beyond the astral sea do not have souls, or more accurately, their body is their soul. To slay one is to slay both, thus you will never encounter the ghost of a devil or a deva. In a similar vein, the elemental beings of the inner planes follow their own logics. They are embodiments of their habitats and thus inseparable from them. You will never encounter the ghost of a water elemental, for example. But does this mean that you could encounter the ghost of a non-humanoid entity, like the krakens we discussed earlier tonight? Oh yes, absolutely. With one caveat: a creature's soul must be powerful enough to break free from its natural cycle, so you will not find ghost ants or ghost house spiders. The scholarly term for a soul's power is its charisma. That is, its presence, its independence, its ability to define itself against its countless siblings. And this attribute is all that matters to a ghost. The more charismatic a creature's soul, then the easier it may be to become a ghost in the afterlife. So yes, stranger, you may encounter ghost centaurs, ghost minotaurs, ghost harpies, and even ghost krakens in the wider world. And that is why I think it is important to understand what they can do, and how they should be handled. Now, all of this discussion about the synonymy of a ghost and a soul begs a somewhat crude question. Why aren't ghosts naked? I mean, it is not as if one's clothing or personal possessions are an important aspect of pneumatology. Well, the answer lies in the lingering connection between a ghost and its material matters. Although the manner of one's death may not relate to one's motivation for returning to haunt the world of the living, though it often does, a being's final resting place serves as a sort of anchor point for the spirit. Possessions and other items left in a person's grave can be manifested by the ghost as an incorporeal accoutrement. These are not part of the ghost itself, and can thus be separated from it. You could disarm a ghost's weapon with the right enchantment for your own blade, but even then you couldn't cut off their hands with it. You cannot segregate a soul. However, the reverse side of this means that removing the grave's personal items would cause them to dissipate away from the ghost, denying them access, though this is likely to drive them into a blind fury. Fury is indeed a common emotion for ghosts. Alongside anguish, it defines existence for them, and that is why most people consider returning as a ghost to be a curse. You see, the great injustice that triggered the soul's return creates what is known as a bond, which becomes the anchor point for the ghost itself, just as its grave is the anchor point for its possessions. Ghost bonds might be a location, a person, or even a weapon or specific item, but they are always frustratingly corporeal entities. If the bond is a specific site, such as the courthouse where they were falsely convicted, or the childhood home that was burned down with them still inside, then the ghost will almost always return to haunt that particular location regardless of where their body is buried. On the other hand, if they are bonded to a living creature, then the ghost may haunt their own graveyard or stalk the poor individual directly. It varies from ghost to ghost. Regardless, the only way to destroy a ghost permanently and return it to the River of Souls is to correct its injustice. While bonds are physical, the slights that bind them to their ghosts are not. In other words, whether or not an injustice exists is irrelevant. All that matters is that the ghost believes it does. This can be both a blessing and a curse to the budding exorcist. The strength of their belief is the fuel that fosters their presence, which means it must be incredibly steadfast. Shifting that perception to break the bond is no small task. To you and me, it may appear as though logical communication could clarify misunderstandings in mere moments, but to a ghost, only a specific course of action will appease them. If they have been murdered, kill the murderer. If they fell to their death whilst constructing a tower, knock the tower down, and so forth. Yet ghost bonds are more than just beliefs. They foster an unparalleled rage within the spirits, overwriting any previous compassion or moderation that may have existed before. The kind, elderly neighbour would return as a menace to the street, while the level-headed, loyal mercenary would kill their former comrades without hesitation or mercy if they stood between the sellsword's ghost and justice. Reasoning and consequences do not exist in a ghost's vocabulary. Of course, this does not necessitate that a ghost be an immoral font of chaos, but in practice most fit into this category quite squarely. Now, if a ghost and its bond are separated by some distance, then the good news is that you may not have to deal with the spirit at all to exorcise it. The bad news is that you must deal with the spirit first to discover precisely what its bond is, and how it should be handled to rectify the perceived injustice. This means that you will probably need to confront the ghost at least once, and an encounter with one is never straightforward and usually violent. Let us consider how best to engage one then, assuming that the ghost is the manifestation of a typical humanoid without knowledge of magic. Remember that nothing is ever guaranteed, but because ghosts reflect populations, most will follow this template. Even a so-called ghost commoner is a respectable threat. Being incorporeal, most blows will yield little progress. Indeed, there are only 3 ways to harm such a creature reliably. Firstly, pure energy, often just called force, does not distinguish between the physical and the spiritual, though sources of this are costly and rare. Secondly, channeling the positive plane, the esoteric source of all life, will harm the undead just as surely as it will heal the living. Thirdly, and most readily for the majority of us, the transmutative magics of the world can create so-called ghost touch weapons, which are capable of interacting with incorporeal beings. Be careful though, because that always means a ghost can interact with them as well, and you may be disarmed if you are not careful. Ghosts are not bound by the same laws that govern us material entities, so they can invariably fly, although elevating themselves too high is a great strain on their sense of identity if they could not do likewise in life. Moreover, because ghosts struggle to interact with the physical world just as much as we struggle to interact with theirs, their most reliable and secure method of wounding another being is simply to touch them. The touch of a ghost is anathema to life, as it is infused with negative energy. Do not allow yourself to make physical contact with one unless you want to become a ghost yourself. The final option for most ghosts is to emit a piercing moan that shares its trauma and anguish with others. I am told this is a supernaturally terrifying thing to endure. Sometimes the howl can even compel others to relive the moment of the ghost's death, pain and all. Like a harpy song, this can be avoided by deafening yourself before a fight, though doing so will leave you unable to negotiate with it as reliably. And negotiate you must, for even if you charge into one's lair fearsomely beweaponed with ghost touch artifacts and exorcist clerics to wield them, you cannot kill the ghost. After enduring sufficient trauma, its body would dissipate like vapor out a window. But the soul would congeal and coalesce over the upcoming days until it was completely rejuvenated, ready for revenge. You could prevent this by erecting an anti-magic field over the spot where it was slain, but this would only delay the inevitable. I repeat, the only true method of banishing a ghost is to set right its injustice. Given this information, the most appropriate strategy when encountering a ghost follows 3 phases. The first is attempted negotiation. There is no reason to instigate a fight unnecessarily, but my experience informs us that ghosts subscribe to the opposite line of thinking more often than not. The second phase is to win any fight that does break out by keeping a good distance, preferably with long, ghost touch spears that keep you out of reach from its touch. Offer to parley once its body is deteriorating, but do not hesitate to destroy it completely if it refuses. After all, it will just come back with its memories, so you can return to Phase 1 if you have to. If you are able to reach Phase 3, forceful negotiation, then you can learn of its bond and chart a course to sever it. As soon as you accomplish this, the ghost will rapidly begin to dissipate for the final time. A word of caution before you excitedly begin your new career as a ghost hunter. Their powers are far more diverse than grasping hands and frightful moans. Some can channel the nature of their death around them, setting things aflame, including you, or filling a room with salt water. Others can merge with their bond and turn it into a weapon against you. Some of the most powerful ghosts can even manifest mock doubles of creatures they have encountered, called fetches, or seek to possess the living directly, suppressing their own control through sheer force of will. Do not underestimate ghosts. The first time you do will also be your last. Well, stranger, I hope I have helped you to survive a ghostly encounter further down the line. I would not worry about Belcora, for she met her fate many years ago, but I would still advise you not to stray too close to Gauntlight Keep. That strange lighthouse harbours far more than the restless dead. So, I think this concludes our midnight tales for the moment. The Rowdy Rockfish always has more to offer, but they will need to come from someone else, for I must seek a warm bed in preparation for my next tour. If you would like to accompany me to Diabel, then look for me at the head of the valley on Rosegard Road when the sun is at its apex on the morrow. Take the morning to visit the shops and market. Remember that Otari is famous for its magical trinkets, so I am sure you will find something that takes your fancy. Then we can depart, armed with your new artifacts and knowledge, and the road to Diabel will seem all the safer. Well, until then.